Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm very excited to welcome Will Hyler to the podcast today to talk about The Barefoot Executive, a Disney movie starring a very young Kurt Russell, released 50 years ago in March of 1971. How are we doing, Will?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Brian. This is a fun one.
Thanks so much for being here. We go back a long way. We met at Loyola Marymount University. What year would that have been? 2004, I want to say we met for the first time.
Sounds right. Yeah, I trust you with the dates.
And so we were at film school there. We got to know each other really well. We went to Dusseldorf, Germany. That was more than 15 years ago, Will. Can you believe that?
Yeah, that's right. Now everything, I know. 2020 was like a nice marker for all that kind of stuff. And now that we're 2021, I have to do a little extra math in there. But yeah,
exactly.
It was a while ago.
And then we graduated in 2007. We were roommates for a few years. And it's just so great to see you again. I haven't seen you in a few years. This is a thrill.
The feeling is mutual.
So I wanted to start, Will, by asking you kind of what role has movies played in your life? What, since you were a kid to now, kind of what role has movies played?
Movies, oh man. Movies and television are, what an incredible window they are to the outside world. Mm-hmm. You know, like I was homeschooled in my younger years for 5 years, and I didn't get a lot of exposure to TV and movies. Mm-hmm. And they always were something that felt larger than life and outside the norm. You know, it's not something that just felt like a regular part of life. And when I sort of went back to high school, and then especially as I went into college, it was just this huge, vast trove of things to absorb about culture, about history, about people. And because I sort of came to it a little later, I think, than my peers, it was fascinating. I mean, I still carry a kind of fascination with the way norms from the past, cultural norms, technological norms, just things that I didn't grow up with as like a regular sort of thing. So it's that point of discovery through film is really important to me. And I think that coupled with the fact that, such a powerful medium for storytelling, emotionally, it's so gripping through all of your senses for the most part. It's just a really potent format. And I'm really drawn to it as an artist. I'm really drawn to it as a viewer for those reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're talking about a Disney movie. Will, did Disney movies play a role at all when you were younger?
Yeah, we had that big fat row of Disney plastic, those chunky plastic VHS cases.
Like bubble cases with the VHS.
Yeah, I had a row of those growing up. They were one of, I said before, I didn't get a lot of exposure, but those definitely, all those tapes wore those out, like many in our generation did. Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, all those kinds of things. And I'm sure you remember, I'm not a giant fan of musicals, and yet that whole range of films are intrinsically musicals, and I love them. So they've wormed through that barrier that I have for musicals.
Yeah, and we were the right age for there was really the second kind of golden age for Disney animation was like 89 to 94 with Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin. I remember you look at the animated films from Disney in like the 70s and 80s to like, to the mid 80s. I mean, there's some that are better than others, but there's really nothing like those like 3 or 4 that came out when we were young. They hold up so well to this day too.
Was that true for you too? Did you really get into the Disney animated films?
Yeah, I mean, on VHS too, and in theaters. I saw Aladdin, Will, 5 times in the theater.
I believe it.
Which ties my record with Jurassic Park. Those are the 2 I saw 5 times in the theater. I'm just like, okay, so I saw it 4 times and I was, come on, Mom, one more time.
Did you go like every weekend kind of thing? How what was the frequency
No,
rate?
This was back in the day, Will, where like if a movie was successful, it would be in theaters for 6 to 8 months, right? In the early 90s. Like I remember Jurassic Park came out in June of 93. And it was out, I think, till like November, December. Like it played a long time.
So it was like just a thing over the summer for you.
Yeah. So you did. Yeah. Back then you didn't have to, like, now, I mean, especially now when we're like, nothing's really coming out now, but before March of 2020, a typical movie, even a successful film, would play for maybe 2 to 3 months. After the 3-month mark, unless it was really successful, it was gone. Right. So, but yeah, Disney movies have played a big role in my life. I had not heard of the Barefoot Executive until recently. I don't know about you. Do you have Disney Plus, Will?
I do. Yeah.
The Barefoot Executive is not on Disney Plus.
Well, I'm shocked about that factoid, Brian. Can't believe that's the case.
How did this happen?
It is a little strange though, because they do put some pretty nuts things on there with some disclaimers. I browse around with my son and just look for random things at times. I saw a video, you might know the name of it, and I can't recall it, but it's essentially a short about a couple of bears in a state park that have some shenanigans in a boat, like a motorboat, and they just throw a couple of cubs in a motorboat and send them off and film them. And I'm like, this is reckless. Why don't they have? What standard are they measuring this stuff? Maybe that one's a classic and this one just isn't, is where they drew the line.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what the reason. I looked everywhere online trying to find if there's any, on Reddit or whatever, like can someone say why the Barefoot Executive is not a part of this? So Disney Plus has short films going back to the 1920s all the way to Steamboat Willie. There's this great search feature on Disney Plus where you can go through the decades, right? And you know me, I'm very structured, Will. I like anniversaries. So when this launched in, I believe, November of 2019, I just started from the beginning and worked my way up. And it actually worked out. Like, it actually matched up. I got to 1970 in December of 2020, right before I talked about the Aristocats, their big animated film from 1970 with Scott Gardner, our previous roommate and our friend Scott. And so it's kind of worked out where I'm kind of like aligned right now with Disney Plus, looking at the 1971 films, early 70s films. I've looked at some rough titles, Will.
Are you scratching just a organizational itch in doing it in that order? Or are you mapping some trajectory about storytelling?
Well, I'm very interested in seeing like the evolution of Disney in terms of, especially their like live action movies. But from like the 40s to now, and kind of seeing the evolution. It's a reason why I've been so interested really in WandaVision, the new Marvel show, right? Which is all about kind of the evolution of television over the many decades, which is really cool. But I've looked at 6 or 7 live action Disney movies now from the early 70s, and it's a rough go, Will. I would say the only one which I haven't watched, because I'm going to get to it later this year on the podcast, I haven't watched it again in a long time, and that's Bedknobs and Broomsticks, starring Angela Lansbury. That came out in the end of 70. Oh, you're not a fan of that one?
No, I love it. No,
I love it.
Okay. No, and unreasonably so. Like I said, that was one I had on VHS, so I can't critique it reasonably, but I agree. I saw it recently, and I said, if I didn't grow up loving this, I'd have a few opinions about it.
So in 1971, really the only 3 major films that Disney had that year were the Barefoot Executive, $1 Million Duck, which I don't know about that one. We'll see if I get to it. And Bedknobs and Broomsticks, which came out at the end of the year. That was their big Christmas release of 71. After 71, Will, there are just these years and years of random titles on Disney Plus for 70s movies I had never heard of before, and so far have not been very good.
Do you think maybe they put a monkey in charge of choosing
I think so.
lineup?
I think they put a chimpanzee, not the chimpanzee in our movie today, right? Because he's very gifted.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, we talked about this a little bit on the Aristocats episode of like, Disney is a little bit adrift in the 70s, right? Walt Disney dies in December of 66, and I think they're cutting back on their budgets, right? I mean, outside of Bedknobs and Broomsticks in the early half of the decade, most of the movies kind of look like they didn't cost very much. I think they're, moving more things to television. And so the 70s for Disney, not a great time for the studio.
I would have guessed as much.
It really takes until the late 80s for them to come back, not only with animation, but also their live action kind of lines up. Like, you get to the end of the 80s, you get better live action movies too. So they begin 1971, Will, with the Barefoot Executive.
Brian,
which,
I'm hoping that you can provide a little context too around the title for this movie. Can you explain the barefoot part of it? Did I miss that in the movie somewhere?
Well, doesn't it just mean because the chimpanzee doesn't wear shoes? Isn't that the idea?
So the idea is that the most recognizable part of a monkey is the fact that he doesn't wear shoes.
Yeah.
He wears the other clothes,
because he
janitorial
wears clothes. He wears
Yeah.
clothes throughout this movie.
Right.
They
right.
they couldn't make it R-rated, Will, so they had to dress up the chimpanzee. So before we get into our thoughts in this movie, Will, I have a short summary and a few little trivia notes about the movie, and you can chime in with anything you'd like during this part. So for those of you who have no idea what this movie is, it stars a very young Kurt Russell. He was 19 years old, Will, when he made this movie. He plays the lead character, Stephen Post. He is a mail boy at a TV network who wants to do anything he can to move up the corporate ladder. He tries to do things outside the box, but is always put down, condescended to by his selfish boss. But things take a turn for the better when Stephen learns that his neighbor's chimpanzee, who his girlfriend, Jennifer, takes in for a short while, has a knack for picking successful television programs. So Stephen uses the chimpanzee's skills in programming to help land him a better job at the network. And he ultimately rises to become vice president at, what is he supposed to be, 19 in the movie too? Very young.
Well, I was going to say, Brian, did you notice Kurt Russell's walk in this? I mean, that was one of the things that really jumped out to me. As I said, I'm more accustomed to him as an older person, right?
Yeah.
So when I see his gait in older films, I think this is the result of being an old man or being in action movies and stuff like that. Apparently not. It's genetic. Watch him amble around in this movie, and he's got the same identifiable, movements.
So the way Kurt Russell is ambling around in the Christmas Chronicles 1 and 2, it's the same movement.
Yeah, well, you watch him going from one side to the other, and he's got this runway strut that he's performing throughout this whole movie.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about his performance in this, which I've seen one other movie where he's young, and that's The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, another Disney movie. This one's from 1969. But yeah, I think he got better as an actor as he got older, Will. I don't know about you. Which we'll talk about. So he becomes vice president of the network. He receives awards for his work. He's being lauded. And but others at the company, they don't really like this about this young guy rising to the top. And so they recognize something is afoot and that Stephen might be getting help from one of the most unlikely of places. That's kind of the synopsis I put together there. Anything I'm leaving out, Will, that's really important that you think the listener should know about the general plot of the movie?
No, I don't think so. Brian, I'll confess that watching this movie brought me back to our experiences together, living together back in our post-college days. And the experience I would have often talking about movies with you where one of my favorite things to do is watch older films and just have my mind blown by weird creative choices, weird things that were normal to do back then and now make no sense. And I would just really enjoy jumping up on a hobby horse and sort of running into you and being like, can you believe this happened? And your reaction has been consistently, it's of the time. You judge it by, what was going on then. And, famously, I don't know if you remember our kind of stars argument that I think was kind of house-wide, where there was a disagreement about how you might rate a film on a 5-star rating system,
Okay. So I adopted the Roger Ebert, Gene Siskel star system of out of 4 stars, right? That was always my thing. So, 3 to 4 stars was good. And then anything under 3 was considered a thumbs down on their show. So.
But the way, and this is, me remembering that fondly because at the time I was eager to give things few stars, right? I would look at something and sort of
wanted to give it 0.
This really sucked. I remember watching Planet of the Apes, that whole series. You had the monkey head with you open the back of the monkey head and you've got all the DVDs back in there, the animations and everything. What a wonderful treat that was for me. And I remember going through it and just being like, 1 star, 1 star, 1 star. It's terrible. and talking with you about it, and you're just like, well, I mean, compared to what? I mean, it's enjoyable, right? You had a good time. Like, isn't that a few stars? You know, and even modern movies at the time, Juno. I remember that was a big movie at the time, and
That's right. I gave that 4 stars, and I haven't really wanted to revisit it ever since. Some movies date themselves well. Some movies at the time, in the moment, I'm like, this is great, and then 10 years on, I'm like, what was I thinking? So that's kind of a reason for this podcast, to kind of not necessarily revisit films, because we weren't alive in 70, 71. So
yeah. Well, that's the thing. Well, that's what I'm driving at here, is that it's a little tough to know exactly how to approach this movie, because in one sense, I kind of want to look at it and say, it is a problematic movie. There's a lot of big problems in here. And when you're talking about the synopsis, that's the way the movie would pitch itself, right? But the important details, if I was sharing, this movie with someone who hadn't seen it, I don't think that I would pitch it that way.
Okay. Yeah. And we talk about the problematic areas in almost every episode, Will. It's hard to get through a film from this era without talking about something, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But so I have a few little bits of trivia to share with our listeners about this movie. So the film's screenplay was written by Joseph L. Mickavidi, whose specialty was apparently writing Disney movies starring Kurt Russell. He wrote, 5 or 6 of them, starting with The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes in 1969, and the final Disney movie for Russell at the time, which was in 1975, and that was The Strongest Man in the World. These were all live action movies starring Russell between 1969 and 1975. Mickavidi also worked as an assistant director and a producer. So, good on you, Joseph. Producing just the finest work of cinema we've ever seen.
Yeah. And
then it was directed by Robert Butler, a prolific director with 100 credits to his name, Will, between 1959 and 2009. 60 years. He mostly directed television, but he did direct a few live action Disney movies, including 3 starring Kurt Russell around this time. He received 3 Emmy Awards and 4 Directors Guild Awards in his long career. He didn't receive any awards for The Barefoot Executive, though.
Okay. Hard to believe, but okay.
Hard to believe, right? No Oscar nomination for this guy.
Okay.
So Kurt Russell, he started acting at age 11. I did not know this. I knew he was he started younger. I didn't know he started that young at 11.
Like in films?
So started in TV. His first feature film credit is 1964, a film called Guns of Diablo. So he was born in 51. So he would have been around 12, 13 at that time. His first Disney movie was Follow Me Boys in 1966. And a lot of his feature films from 66 to 75 were Disney. So I'm assuming he was under contract. There was probably a long contract where they would just push him into the next Disney project, right? Because he did a lot of them. I mean, at least 7 or 8 over those 10 years. He appeared in such films as The Horse in the Gray Flannel Suit. And this is interesting. In 1968, he's in a Disney movie called The One and Only Genuine Original Family Band. How's that for a title? Starring a very young Goldie Hawn. Well, look, he would be in a relationship with starting in 85, 86, and still with her today.
The titles of these real life pieces are just as ridiculous as the titles of fictional TV shows within this movie. And while watching this movie, I thought to myself, who is coming up with these titles? I was writing them down like, this is ridiculous. Devil Dan, what are these things? But they're right in line apparently with the trends of the time.
Yeah, there are very few bland titles of these Disney movies at the time. His final film for Disney at this time was The Strongest Man in the World in 1975. After that, he starts to work with John Carpenter on a TV movie called Elvis. And of course, after that, he's in Escape from New York and The Thing and some really great movies for Carpenter. He also worked with Robert Zemeckis in a movie called Used Cars in 1980. And then Zemeckis right after that went on to Back to the Future and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. This kind of blew my mind, Will. I looked up his awards list. He has never been nominated for an Academy Award, Kurt Russell. He's only been nominated for 1 Golden Globe way back in 1983 for Silkwood, a drama starring Meryl Streep. In 60 years in film, he's been an active, prolific actor for 60 years. he's never gotten an Oscar nomination, which kind of surprised me.
Absolutely shafted. That's terrible.
Well, there's still time, right?
Right.
There's still time for Kurt, but are you a fan of Kurt Russell? He's one of my favorites. Like if he's in something, I'll check it out. Like I've always really liked Kurt Russell. So it just surprises me that he hasn't gotten more like awards consideration.
No, absolutely. Yeah. It's weird because I think that my idea of Kurt Russell is kind of locked in the 90s.
Yeah.
That kind of 80s, 90s
like
thing.
Action
He's one of those
films.
Yeah, he's like eternally that age in a way, even though I've seen plenty of things of him in more modern times. I think the Fast and the Furious, when he showed up in that movie, that was when it really hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, this dude's old.
He got old.
Yeah. And that was a movie where they didn't want him to look old, right? They were dressing him up in hair dye and everything else. And it was not convincing to me at all. I mean, we can get off on a tangent on Fast 9 anyway. But I mean, like those movies are not convincing to me. When they threw him in the mix, it didn't add anything for me. But he the turn for that though is when he went to the Christmas Chronicles, like the Santa,
the more family friendly.
Yeah. Like I was like, this is where you belong. This big white beard, the big white hair. This is perfect for you right now. But,
so you prefer him doing more family friendly entertainment than like an R-rated action film kind of a thing?
Don't you think he's got that charisma? I mean, I agree that he's got a kind of alpha male mode that works in movies, but honestly, I think you kind of see that stuff trending away these days, right? We don't have quite so many just I'm a total misogynist and I blow stuff up like movies coming out too much. I mean, aside from the Fast and the Furious, right? I said I wouldn't get into that, but but no, even those movies are like, it's about family instead of, it's about my possessions. This movie, I'll save it for later. But I mean, I'm enjoy seeing this dude have a softer side in family movies. That's nice, especially as like an actual old person, right? Instead of someone who's like, wild hogs dressed up or something like that.
Yeah, and I feel like today's audiences who might be into Kurt Russell's work, I bet a lot of them might not even be aware of the fact that he was a Disney actor when he was younger. It's kind of like this whole separate part of his career.
Yeah.
So a few other things real quick. So the Barefoot Executive, it marked the final film appearance of Wally Cox. I believe he plays the boss. He's like one of the major supporting characters in the movie. And it marked the feature film debut, Will, of John Ritter. Great John Ritter, who was probably my favorite actor in this movie.
Yeah.
I thought he was really fun. He was great. Like for a first film credit, I thought he did really well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you tell me, who was the guy? I think he made 3 appearances. It was the 2 old dudes who were like the shadowy board figures, who had they had those interactions where they were just like, it's very good. It's very good. Like they were just chewing the scenes up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. So,
Those
I mean,
two.
it's something I'm going to get into, something I did not like about this movie in terms of the ensemble cast. I got very confused often. Like who was who, like what was his job? What was his job? A lot of the character actors kind of look the same. They're all kind of like the same age and the same hair. And I'm like, who's like, it's hard. Some of these older movies, when you don't know who the actors are for the most part, you're like, wait, who are you? What are you doing?
Well, I think pacing has something to do with that too, right? This movie is just one relentless slog of just dead air, like bad Foley, little gusts of wind. Yeah, it's hard to follow when there's no cadence, there's no tension.
There's not very much tension. The only tension really is will the chimpanzee be able to open the beer bottle?
I felt tense. That was just tense within me, being like, they did this to a monkey. Holy moly. I just, there's so many segments in this movie where I was just imagining a theater full of children and adults even doubled over in laughter because they kept coming back to these things. And I'm like, I'm sure at the time they thought like, yeah, let's come back to this joke. It's going to kill. And it probably did. And now I'm just watching in horror like, oh no, they didn't do it once. They did it twice. They really meant it, They
would really stretch it out. Yeah. So the final thing to share, Will, that this movie was remade in 1995 for the Disney Channel.
It ain't so.
From Oscar-nominated director Susan Seidelberg, who made Desperately Seeking Susan, starring Madonna, and She-Devil, starring Meryl Streep. In the mid-90s, Will, she moved on to the remake of The Barefoot Executive for the Disney Channel.
Like as a Disney movie?
It's like, yeah, for TV,
movie,
like
TV
it
movie,
didn't
yeah.
open in theaters in 1995. It just aired on the Disney Channel. I do not believe that is on Disney Plus either.
Well, there was a lot of crimes that happened on the Disney Channel, especially
So
in the
somebody
90s.
somewhere will said, what if, like, for next year's lineup, what if we did a remake of the Barefoot Executive?
Brian, I've been exposed to a lot of this stuff. The 90s was an era where I was away from TV, so I didn't grow up.
Okay.
You know, I had my VHS tapes, but I didn't have cable. I didn't watch all this stuff. And thanks to friends like you and my wife and other people in my generation, I've been told that there are a bunch of these things that happened in the 90s, and I've been told they're good, but when I see them, it doesn't hold true.
Yeah, some things haven't lasted. I remember when we were roommates and I got access to a copy of Fairy Tale Theater from the 80s with Shelley Duvall, which was one of my favorite things as a young kid. And I'm like, oh my God, it's on DVD. And I got you and everybody in the room were watching these. And I think we made it through half of one. And I had to say, I'm sorry. We are going to put something else on.
Yeah, we learned a lot about ourselves that way. Yeah.
But nothing was worse, Will. I remember you came with me it was Labor Day weekend 2007 to see the remake of my favorite horror film, Halloween. Rob Zombie directed a remake, and you came with me to that. Yeah. And you had to listen to me on the entire drive home talking about how terrible it was.
I think I was right there with you.
Yeah. It was very strange to have a film that's so beloved, I love so much, and then it's just torn apart in this remake. Yeah. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
So I don't think anything we watch together will be as bad as that. But
well, Brian, not to get you off on a tangent there, but I wonder if you have any opinion about. I mean, not just nostalgia, but I tend to think that there is something about the filmmaking process from that era that makes some of this camp stuff work, right? Because when they try to remake horror in a like these old films, right, that are more beloved, and they try and do a spin on them now. Do you think there's something about the technology or the way scripts are written now that inherently makes them less desirable than, you know what I mean, the way they did it in that time?
I think it's about the trends. So in the 2000s, the trend for horror films was more blood, more gore, torture porn, make it really shocking. And that's happened to coincide with this new trend of let's remake every beloved old horror film from, I mean, Black Christmas. And I mean, Carrie had a remake later. And then you had Nightmare on Elm Street had one, and Texas Chainsaw had one. I mean, pretty much everything from that was released in the 70s and 80s, almost every horror film got a remake. And it was during this time when it was a lot of blood and gore. So it just, they haven't lasted. I mean, a couple of them are okay. The Dawn of the Dead remake from 2004, I think, is pretty good, but most of them are disappointing.
What's I'm drawing a blank here. What's the one with the dude with the chainsaw hand? You know, the famous one with
the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
No. Bruce Campbell.
Oh yeah, right. The Evil Dead.
Evil Dead. Yeah. Isn't that famously when the first one, the camera movement in there, that was kind of a newish thing where they were running around with the camera and thing all indie style with 16 millimeter or whatever. Because the thing that's interesting to me is to think that at the time, a lot of this stuff packed some shock value because what you were seeing visually was new. You know, and the idea of the camera moving this way or people having this much blood on screen or whatever. And some of that shock really made the film work where it doesn't now. Right? Like that kind of stuff is so commonplace that you're like, I don't know what works, but still people love that movie, even though I think pretty objectively the scares are predictable and, you know, like the visuals are not convincing. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was watching the other day, the 1950 something William Shatner Twilight Zone episode where he's looking out the window and you got the monster on the wing, right? And that monster looks objectively ridiculous. That's
it's called Nightmare at 20,000 feet from season 5.
Right. And then they remade it in the 70s with their updated prosthetics and the monster technology and the robotics and stuff. And in many ways, like they were going for that same thing that you're talking about in the 2010s, where it's just like blood and gore and just sort of hitting the visual piano note really hard. The story elements are the same though, and that's where the scare comes in, right? And so when you see the 50s version, it's all still there, and it is impactful, because if you close your eyes and think to yourself, what would I do if someone wouldn't believe me and I saw a thing and it was going to put us in peril? And that story itself is the gem of that. Obviously not the woolly monster. And then when you just remake it with some new technology, does it work? You know what I mean? In a way, it's like,
sometimes it works. I mean, I think The Thing, starring Kurt Russell from 1982 by John Carpenter, is a better film than the 1951 black and white original, which is very like low budget. You can kind of see, you know, the monster zipper behind his back kind of a movie. Same thing with The Fly with Vincent Price from the 50s, black and white, remade into a much better film in 86 starring Jeff Goldblum.
Well, those are examples of movies that were like not as good, right? But I mean, if we're talking about a movie that is in the 70s that is a cult beloved film, and then they try and remake it now, right? What else are you going to add on there except more modern blood, more pyrotechnics or something, right?
Yeah. If the story is simple, like there's only so much you can do to update it. You know, you just add new, like a young hip cast and more blood, more gore, and okay, that'll do it. And usually that's not enough. You have to give it another, you know, different kind of spin.
Oddly, it seems to provoke a revolt, right? Where people look at it and they go like, wait a minute, this is the same thing, except it's got more stupid stuff in it, right? Whereas the other one, you're like, it's got stupid stuff, but they couldn't do better, right? So you just, you like it.
Yeah, exactly. So the question is, we've already had one remake of the Barefoot Executive, Will. Do you think there'll be another remake soon?
Oof, the climate's getting close, except this one.
Maybe it'll be a series on Disney Plus. It'll be like an 8-episode series.
Well, I you know, look, we've got a golden age of television that we're deeply into at this point. I almost wonder if there's a political spin to put on this one, right? I mean, what about, you know, TV shows or Quibi, right? Quibi, we could have Quibi. We could mix a Quibi story.
Didn't that go under? Isn't that done?
Right, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, you could mash Quibi and a biopic about Quibi and the Barefoot Executive together, and I think you'd have a hit.
Yeah, we're going to talk about, my last question for you is about like, how would this be updated in 2021 if they were to make it a new movie? But before we get to that, just this film itself, Will, the 1971 movie, what did we think? I know you've shared a few of your thoughts. Was it all bad? Was it all just a slog every step of the way?
Well, look, I already gave you a preview of the hand wringing I did while watching this movie, because I wanted to show growth to you. I wanted to come on this podcast and wanted you to recognize that I've grown as a critic, and you've been an instrumental part of that. You're often in my mind when I watch movies because
thank you.
I do really enjoy hating movies, right? There's the things that are really yucky, and I love calling them out. That's fun, but that's a personal thing. That's a me thing, right? At the same time, there's a lot of things to appreciate in any film. Look, it got made, it got done, right? And that's a huge achievement.
It was really, shot, and then it got edited, and then it like it was put in theaters, and people walked into the theater.
So that's where I'm starting, Brian. I mean, it got made, right? So I mean, 3 cheers there. But no, a lot of the things that I appreciated were from the technical side. And not due to skill, but just interest in the times, right? It's really fun to look at these things and say, oh, this is how they did it. Like an example of that is the fact that every TV in this movie was cut out with blue screen. Like they matted every TV in every instance, and it looks really wonky. But I mean, it's even like when they're driving in the car. This is one of my favorite things from that era, is watching them doing that classic rear projection thing back there. Or
doing it in 71, still got the rear projection.
I don't know that was rear projected though as a thing. I think that was matted out.
Okay. Were they not in a studio, like where the car is like shaking? And
I think they were, but if I had to guess, and I didn't look it up, but if I had to guess, they do it in front of a color in a chroma screen at this point, and they just mat it out. But what I love about it is that it seems so obvious at this point that, you know, we know how film works. At a certain depth, things get blurry, right? But in the car, they just cut a hole and they put some in focus footage back there, right? And they're driving around the car, bobbing around. Independently of that, I'm like, okay, maybe, you know, stabilization and stuff isn't a thing. That's just thing. But this is so easy. Just blur that sucker out, right? Just make it blurry back there. But the problem with it, I suppose, is that your matte edges are going to be too sharp at that point. So it really calls out the matte. Not that it was convincing anyway. Look, I'm a visual effects artist. This is where my I tunnel vision in on this stuff. So when I saw it, I just really enjoyed recognizing the technology and saying that this is how they did this. Yeah, in the reflections on the TVs, because we saw banks of TVs constantly throughout the beginning where he was saying, oh, this monkey has got some special power, and look at him change the channels and stuff. And so they had to mat out all the different TVs. And it's really fun to me that those kinds of weird, obvious visual glitches, they look so weird. You look at them, they're just like, man, print it, send it out, print it.
like the shot of the guy hanging off the ledge, right, is at the top of that building. That's clearly something like what rear projection. What is that? Do you think? Because it looked weird.
You mean the suicide sequence?
He's like hanging off, and it's like a close up on his face, and you can clearly see behind him. That's not really there. I'd be curious to know how they did that shot.
I think it was matted too.
It was matted.
All of it was. Yeah, I think rear projection has a softer edge around the characters, but they were harsh. All of these edges were harsh.
Yeah, so we're paying attention to the visual effects in this movie. In terms of its plot, in terms of its just plot, where it goes from A to B to C, this one was pretty lame. Like the plot of this movie is just so absurd, and it's like I can get past it if it's funny. Like if it's funny and it's amusing with this chimpanzee, and it could get a few laughs out of me. The only big laugh for me was the chimpanzee opening up the beer. That was about it.
I'm enjoying your. I'm so restrained. Gosh, I really feel like the tables are spun around here. Usually, I'm the one on direct attack here, and you're usually playing defense on it. But I agree. I'm right there with you. The storyline, it kind of hit me halfway through. I said, oh, this is just the very simple premise. When they were going through talking to the guy on the jackhammer and the lady coming out of the grocery store, they're like, let's get a couple of these everyday folks in there and really let the audience know what we're getting at here. That was the idea, is someone sitting around, and I suppose in the 70s and maybe up through the 90s, or I don't know when this kind of feeling stopped, but I think people enjoyed watching television, right? And enjoy as part of their routine, and you'd watch a show and it'd get canned and they'd be like, oh no, where's my favorite characters? And it probably
ended with a cliffhanger.
Yeah, and it happened pretty frequently, to the point that people would make this silly joke that like, who's running that station over there? A bunch of monkeys kind of thing. And that it felt like that was enough in the zeitgeist that they were just like, wait, hold on here.
We have an idea.
We get a hold of a monkey. What if we could throw him in front of the camera? And I mean, that's the entirety of the idea here, because they worked really hard to weave some type of satisfying emotional arc or ethical arc for some reason in it. I mean, do you remember the boardroom meeting where they were just like, if the American people knew that a monkey was programming stuff, what would happen? What would happen then? I mean, they talked about it like they'd burn the stations down, you know? Then they're like, we got to kill the monkey, or we got to throw him out of an airplane. Like, this is all the way to 11. We got to go to solve this problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the lengths they take to like do away with this monkey in the second half of the movie, it's very problematic, and just like, what? This isn't funny. This is just very odd and dated. Like the way that they take this thing. I think it would have worked better if Kurt Russell's performance wasn't so incredibly stiff all the way through.
Do you think if he was like a better actor, it might have?
Yeah, I mean, I even noted, I thought that John Ritter was more charismatic in his kind of villainous role. I think he would have made a better lead in this movie.
Well, Brian, that brings a good question up, which is, are there any good guys in this movie? Isn't everyone a villain in this movie?
Is the girlfriend a villain?
Well, I mean, maybe a hapless one, or like she figures it out, right? We have that intense close up where this horror is coming over her face, where she realizes, holy shit, my boyfriend has stolen my monkey, right? I gotta go confront this asshole. She goes down to his place and is like, he's trying to throw roadblocks up, and she's like, not having it. No, where is he? You lied to me. And he's like, she caught me. Here's the monkey. And she's just like, this is the end. And he goes like, but what if we got married though? That's what women like, right? And she's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's back this train up a little bit here. Yes, that does sit well with me. And hey, keep the monkey. Why not? Have him in the prison cell back there. That's pretty cool with me. I don't have to feed him anymore. And so for me at that moment, that's where her true stripes come out, right? She's a villain at that point to abandon someone that she professes to care about in the name of marriage to someone who clearly doesn't deserve her.
Yeah. So Will, if someone offered you $1 million, which I looked up in 1971,
what was that?
1971 was $6.5 million. Would you give it back? to be the better man.
So what's weird to me is that like they were like, listen, Steve, be smart, boy, take the money, you know?
Yeah. And then there's a 5-second pause, and the guys go, okay, not 500 grand. My final offer is $1 million. And Kurt Russell's like, I might have to take this. It's like, what? 19?
Well, I suppose he's a kid, right? So he doesn't understand. But the weird part about it is that he has them over a barrel, I guess. But does he?
Why do they have to pay him that much money?
Isn't the premise here that the entire conglomerate of television networks have come together to eject this monkey because they can't trust any one of them to have this power over the other? So they're uniformly rejecting him. So he can't get a job. Just fire him. Where is he going to take the monkey? There's no other networks, right?
Mm-hmm.
This
is 71, Will, where there's really only 3 networks, but this movie creates a 4th called UBC.
He's clearly not smart enough to start his own network. This guy, look, he has a whole segment in the movie where he feels, look, I want to get into this more, but he feels so bad that all he can do is steal someone else's power, that he wants to be emotionally comforted by Jen over it. Yeah. Right. He literally compares himself to a colonizer. The dude is a colonizer. He visits a place, he strips it, he takes the power back for himself. Someone else labors on his behalf, and he feels real bad about it. And then at the end, when he does the wrong thing systematically, he also, man, if he had one more choice, he would do the right thing. So he wants to feel good about it too at the end. The dude's rotten all the way through, Brian. He's real bad.
So we have a lead character who is the star of not just any movie, but a Disney movie, and he's just like kind of this rotten guy that we don't really root for. I wrote that in my notes. I'm like, I'm never really rooting for this guy to succeed. He's kind of an ass. I wrote that
constantly. Who is the good guy here? It's like during the suicide sequence, I was like, I feel bad for everyone involved in this. Like this is a bad thing that's happening. They want to broadcast it. I couldn't tell if it was parody. And this is not just in the world of the movie. In the one sense, I'm looking in and I'm saying, if I just imagine this is a real world, this is bad for everybody involved. But then when you take the next step back, you pull back from the fourth wall and you say, someone wrote this sequence thinking people were going to laugh at this person's suicide attempt, right? And the fact that a television crew would fly in and like film it, and it was like an exclusive. I'm like, are you trying to tell me, the filmmaker, are you trying to tell me that this guy's desire to film a suicide and having an exclusive makes him morally bankrupt, right? Are we trying to, are you imposing a judgment on the executives in that direction? Because it doesn't feel that you have that level of awareness from the sequence playing out in front of me, where the guys are falling to their death repeatedly, right? Like their clothes are tearing. We're supposed to be making light of this. So I at all times, I'm confused about who we're supposed to be rooting for and what the filmmakers want out of this whole charade.
Well, Will, the filmmaker, the director of this movie, Robert Butler, is still with us. He's 93. So should I get him on the phone?
He's on the phone. Let's get it. He's been listening in.
Yeah, he's gonna. How dare you? This is my masterpiece.
Yeah.
And that scene on the ledge goes on and on, right? Like Kurt Russell disappears from the movie for like 20 minutes towards the end, and I'm like, who are we following here? What is happening?
Yeah, no, he's there to service the setup. And then after that, the filmmakers, it feels like the filmmakers are writing this as they went along. And they got to that sequence and they just went, we're in a corner now. Well,
Yeah, they're pumping them out right now, Will. I mean, Disney has at least 3 live action movies a year, if not more than that. And the family friendly entertainment around this time in the feature film world is not very good, right? You have the occasional, I think The Love Bug from the end of '69 is a pretty great movie. Like, it's a lot of fun, great cast. That I think they're trying to replicate in a lot of these early '70s movies with their absurdist plots, and they really can't. So they just started making a bunch of sequels to the Love Bug. That's all they could do.
I don't know. I wrote several times in here some variation of this is classic boomer culture happening on screen. It's like prime boomer time, and the kinds of things that they find funny and the kinds of things that they value and the way that the morality play makes sense, it works within a boomer construct, right? And it's real gross the whole way through. It's not something I enjoyed at all. We keep referencing the suicide sequence, but I mean, for people who haven't seen it, right? I didn't clock it. I don't know if you have any idea how long it is, but it is inherently nonsensical piece of the plot that plays out just for laughs.
At least 10 minutes long. At least 10 minutes.
The whole conceit is that the monkey's in one room, in the guy's penthouse, locked in the room. You can't get in traditional doors. You have to go over the ledge to the window, break in to get the monkey out. And they send he's president of culture or something at the company at this point. So he's kind of a lackey. But I mean, at one point he was VP of the station, right? He was or president of the station.
He was president high up, and he is not happy with Steven, the Kurt Russell character. Him
and his driver, they send him out to go get the monkey himself. Just pay someone. He could easily just pay someone. No, we see this guy doing it.
Actually on the ledge.
He opens the window, and it's not even like one of these Ghostbuster ledges or something that's like comfortably wide. It's terribly dangerous the whole way through. And he has to go like 10 windows over. I have no idea why it takes so many windows to get over there, because it's literally hallway, house, and it's not like several over. It's like literally one wall he has to get across. But he's 5 windows down, opens the window, pulls the monkey out. Him and the monkey, they go all the way back. The monkey scales the wall all the way down to the bottom, right? They almost die 6 times. They go back to the original hallway window. It's locked. Can't get back in there, right? So then they got to go back to the monkey's window. The monkey has been taken by his captor, Steve, all the way back up to the room, placed back in. They get back. What? How did the monkey get back? This is all hilarious, apparently. They can't open the window. The monkey puts the shades down. They have to go all the way back now. At this point, it looks like they're going to commit suicide to the people down below. So they call the police and the fire brigade, and everyone comes out and makes a big spectacle about it. And they can't, they try to go back to the window, but due to their own failings, one of the head guy falls down, clearly should have died, right? Guy clearly should have died.
Did we like that? Did we like how that was edited, Will, to him falling?
I liked seeing the body. I liked seeing the it was like a dummy, right? It was just like a flopsy dummy.
At least one of the shots is a dummy falling,
Yeah. He falls to a 8-foot burlap canvas like disc, and with minimal impact, just boop up, I landed off to the loony bin. You go.
I'm good.
Yeah, and the other guy walks out because the father, what's his name, comes to get him. All right, so that what I just described, A, shouldn't have happened. B, should only have taken a couple of minutes. But instead, like you said, it's a solid.
Do you think it was really just a matter of filling up time? Because how long is the film? 90 minutes? Was it longer than 90? It was like 95, maybe. Sometimes
37.
I think it's about like, crap, we're coming in at 78 minutes. We have to pad some of this movie. Like, let's extend that sequence. Sometime.
Well, I agree with your reference about the Love Bug, because a lot of this stuff is slapstick, right? A lot of the
Love Bug's a legitimately funny movie. I really enjoy that one.
Yeah, I do too. The abusive humor, though, is something that really doesn't age well, though, does it? I mean, it's even in the Love Bug where the main guy is just like, hey, screw this piece of trash. I literally want to burn this car, but wait, it's helping me now somehow. Like it's to my advantage. I can use it. The nice part is that the protector in that movie, the mechanic guy, at least he's like coaching him through it. Like, hey, get it. Do you have no capacity for love? Whereas the monkey is entirely on his own. And to go back to my earlier rant about Jen, is abandoned by the only person who professes to care for him.
Yeah, exactly. I think another thing lacking in this movie is just really good visual gags, right? There's stretches of 30 minutes where's the comedy coming from? It's, I guess, only coming from the chimpanzee, but even a lot of the scenes with the chimp, he's just kind of in the background. He's not really doing anything funny. So I was questioning where's the comedy coming from in a lot of this movie?
Do you forgetting the sequence with the male elevator going up and down? And
that was good. Yeah,
that was dangerous.
Fantastic.
That was a scary moment. Look, Brian, talk to me a little bit about the mechanics of the scheme here, right? He finds a monkey.
Okay, yeah.
Monkey
let's go
predict-
back. Let's go back to the introduction to the monkey, right? So he comes home from work, right? He tried something at work to make himself like give him maybe an opportunity to rise up in this company, and it backfires, right? They're all sitting down to watch this new program, and it's one that Kurt Russell's character put without telling anybody, right? And they're like, "What just happened?" And when he gets home, he's like, "Oh, I don't know about my job. It's not looking good." And his girlfriend has the chimpanzee in the apartment that they share, right? And it's like a neighbor that she's just
he doesn't live there, though. He doesn't live there. No, he broke in.
He broke into his girlfriend's apartment. He doesn't have a key.
Yeah, remember? She was like, "How'd you get in here?" And he's like, "The super let me in. She's real nice."
Okay, so he's not allowed in his girlfriend's apartment.
No, apparently not. And look, I won't get off too far on this tangent, but when they show up early on in the movie and they're like hanging out and stuff, he's like, where this monkey come from? She's like, the neighbors had to leave, right?
Yep.
And they're going to put him in the zoo where he belongs, right? She was like, no, I can't have someone who's professionally caring for this monkey. I got to keep him in my apartment. Mm-hmm. No problem. Whatever, we'll roll with it. He shows up and she's making dinner and she's like, will you open the bottle of wine? Will you set the table and stuff like this? And I'm like, these kids are 20. And I'm recalling what you and I were doing at that age. It was not like this. And this also goes to my whole boomer rant about the way expectations were for them. Like, this is normal. This is what you stick in the movie next to this crazy clown car movie, the monkey element, right? They're just like, this is what it is, right? You leave high school, you waltz into a $30 an hour job, and
we weren't doing that at 20. Will just waltzing into Disney, the Walt Disney Company, and starting out as the mail boy.
Continue. Sorry.
I feel like when we were 20, if we wanted to do that, we would have been the intern. We would have been the intern of the company.
Yes.
Like doing something a lot less fun than retrieving mail and distributing the mail. Be getting a lot of lunches.
Yeah.
So the introduction to the chimpanzee is interesting in that the chimpanzee is wearing clothes. And that's like, okay. And then we're introduced to this idea like that the chimp has this ability to recognize good programming because it refuses to watch the show that Steven wants to watch. It will only watch this other thing, right?
Yeah.
And then he's already starting to think about, maybe this creature can help me.
Does that leap out to you though? That's the thing that caught me right off the bat was like, does some scheme hit you when you see that? Wait, a monkey who knows the ratings as they come out the next day, right?
That's why it doesn't work. It's just so ridiculous. It's like, first off, it's just very dated and doesn't translate to now. It's hard to kind of get into the plot just in terms of how dated it is. But then it's just like, wait, what? Like it claps for not only good programming, but like programming that the chimpanzee knows will be successful and people will tune in. It's so
apparently 10 in a row. Like, what is this? 5 claps for number 1, 3 claps for number. I mean, they don't get into the way it works. And you're just supposed to go, well, of course it's a gold mine. I can see that. I'm bought into this concept.
They don't do that anymore, Will. Like Netflix, they're not like waiting for the clapter from the monkey to ensure what shows that they greenlight, and
they've moved on to other animals. They're smarter now.
They have the cows now help out. Yeah.
And this dude, I mean, but Steve is so desperate to literally his only desire here is to be rich, right? And that's such a boomer attitude too. It's not like the guy is a creative or somebody who's like, man, this is a passion of mine.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's about making money and going up the ladder. It's not about creativity or imagination or anything.
I don't know about the way you felt, but when he took him into the screening room, when Steve took the monkey into the screening room, and there was the projectionist named Tom. Tom immediately lit up the room. Like he was like, oh, this little dude, hey, I love hanging out with him, right? He was like, Nice to the monkey, kind to the monkey. He didn't even question what was going on. He was just there to have a good time. And I was like, I want to watch this movie with him in the projection room, having shenanigans, whatever. I like Tom. And Steve was just like, did you see Steve drag the monkey in a mailbag up the stairs and dump him in the floor and be like, get him ready. We're watching some films. It was gross.
Speaking of the projection booth, I haven't said this yet. For those of you only listening, if you look at the YouTube version of our conversation here, Will has created this graphic where we actually get to see the chimpanzee from the movie, and Will is on the left side of the projection booth. Will is a great visual artist, and he has put together something that no other guest of mine has, and is pretty fantastic.
I wanted to stand out, but I also wanted to pay tribute to the part of the movie that I enjoyed most. Look at this happy monkey just watching the thing, and I'm playing Tom here, who's just running the thing that makes him happy. Look, Steve, was walking down the street, and apparently back then, seeing a monkey in a window is not crazy. Like, they had pet shop stuff, and apparently monkeys were included in that. And the guy just goes, hey, brilliant idea. I literally bring it to my girlfriend's apartment, swap these monkeys so I can steal this one, and then run this banana scheme, to make a pun, about taking him into the office so that he can clap, right? And Steve, so the projection room is where they run the movies or the TV show. They run the pilot episode. They say, is this one good or is this one bad? And they sit there with the executives. And because he makes a prediction early on, and they're just like, oh, he's a magic man, let's get him in here. He brings the monkey in so that he can tell what's good and bad, because he has no talent. He doesn't know what's good and bad, right? Yeah. So what does he do? He goes in the projection room, he sits down, and he watches the screen. Don't watch the screen. Turn around and watch the monkey. The monkey is in the projection booth behind him. If I was this dude, I would sit in a 3/4 kind of constantly looking at this monkey, right? Instead, he just, the way they depict it is he's like watching Devil Dan, and it's like, oh, I'm into this. I wonder what this monkey thinks of it. And he like casually looks back and like, no, oh well. They don't even follow through on what the best execution of this insane plan would have been. Right? He's bad at being terrible.
So, I mean, if you had to pick something that like works the best in this movie, like what would you go with? Like, what's something that you thought worked, or that worked okay? Anything at all? Anything to do with the movie at all?
Oof.
I kind of like, you know what I kind of like? The opening and closing song. I thought was kind of fun.
Yeah, you like that?
It's been in my head since I saw it, so that's something.
Well, I made a note about that and wondered whether this is just sloppy ridiculousness or if there's something a little more to it. Because don't the lyrics go like, he's gonna take this world and he's gonna take this playing. Yeah, the lyric is, he's gonna take this cockeyed world and show him. Like, it's some type of anthem to Steve, as though and I'm sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent here for your thing, but the sequence of him driving away, he's like, screw the money, screw whatever, it's just me and this family. I'm like, this makes no sense.
Where are they going?
There's no arc here, right? He's just like, well, back to where I started with nothing learned, and off we go. And the anthem's like, he's gonna show the world. Show him what? That he's profoundly dumb? He's got nothing. No redeeming quality.
You know, when I teach, we talk about character arc a lot, and I don't know if Steve has much of a character arc in this movie.
Did not follow Joseph Campbell's formula. We didn't get back to where we needed to go.
And did you notice, Will, at the beginning, this is something, I don't know if I've seen this in any other movie, but we open with credits, like opening credits of cast members, and every time we see the actor's name, it has the character name too, including like woman, executive, number 4. Like, it has everybody with their name before the movie starts. That was very odd.
Well, memorably, also the monkey, right? It was like, also introducing this monkey. Like, they just gave the whole thing away. I suppose.
Keep it a secret.
I suppose at that time you're going to see not necessarily the trailer, but the poster at least. And it's going to have the monkey on there. So I suppose you're going in for a monkey movie, and you're just like, let me see him.
I think the audience knew in early '71 going in that it had a monkey in one of the lead roles. Like, I don't know. I mean, I think like the name Disney would bring in audiences no matter what. But I think a lot of people probably assume, oh, there's going to be some crazy shenanigans with this monkey. Get the family. Let's go. you know?
Yeah, I mean, not to even speak on how profoundly bizarre it is, just that era. And I mean, it's not even that old, long ago that we stopped doing this, but just the animal cruelty and treatment is a little hard to bear. Like in the beginning, he meets this monkey and he's like, this monkey's in my chair, so I'm gonna yeet this thing right over into that chair. I mean, he drops this monkey hard. You know, it's not even a character thing where it's just like, I'm grumpy for whatever. He picks this poor creature up and like dumps him in a hard wooden chair, and I'm not on board with that. You know, it's really hard to come back from. So.
Yeah, animal cruelty in films around this time, 71. Yeah, you would see that more often than you would obviously see it today. Yeah. I mean, there's that scene towards the end where he's got, what does he have around his neck? The monkey, that it made me very uncomfortable when they're leading the chain. They're leading the monkey into the elevator, and it's supposed to be kind of this serious, you know, dramatic moment. And he's like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't have taken the $1 million." And all I can think about is just the stress that the animal is going through at that moment.
Well, what about when they were going to literally throw him out of an airplane with a parachute, as if he had any parachute training or even knew how to do it? And it was so pronounced, the way that the guy was chanting, you know, throw this monkey out, and like the monkey was resisting.
And that guy's trying to shove him out the window, and the monkey's like, no. And it's not funny. It's very disturbing.
He's kind of got this emotional note, like, I really don't think he wants to go. And they're just like, well, make him. And I think people were meant to be laughing at that point. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't a horror thing that then was released by them all being ejected comedically at the back.
And then as soon as they're ejected, we just cut to their parachutes, right? So you know, they didn't all die.
yeah.
Which Will would have liked to have seen, like, at least one of them going, ah, like
honest, I don't know. Maybe you know, this is a classic kind of poetry interpretation problem that you run into as an English teacher, but you know, looking for interpretations in metaphor where they're not necessarily there, or saying like the author intended, blah blah blah. Well, the sequence where they're about to take off in the airplane, right, and he's like, "You're in charge," to his driver instead of his nephew, right? The chain of command there. The driver takes his hat off and reaches over to Ritter's head, takes his hat off. They switch, and he's like, "Poof, I'm in charge now," right? And the character's name's Roger, right? The nephew. He gets into the driver's seat. I mean, he's pissed. He's not, but fully accepts it. And he gets into the driver's seat. The driver gets in the back and literally owns the network now. Like, he's in charge, because the whole raft of them are in the jungle somewhere. And honestly, do they go to South America? Where are they throwing this monkey out of the airplane? Did they even say?
Yeah, it might have been South. Yeah, it's somewhere really far. Yeah.
Every executive got in the airplane to see it happen. They needed to make sure it did.
Couldn't have someone else do that.
Yeah, but the to me, it stood out as this way that power is being arbitrarily assigned. It's like, burp, burp, now I'm in charge of the whole deal. And the fact that they just bought into it, I wanted to go too far with that metaphor and interpret it too much, because I don't think the filmmakers had that much intention behind it. But I thought it was especially around the imagery of the colonizer. And honestly, Brian, I don't know if you picked up on this detail. This is something I was enamored with throughout the movie. And I'm going to do a image search on this stuff, because the artwork, did you notice the artwork in this movie? Every wall had some crazy piece of artwork. In the executive's office, there's a portrait, right, on both sides of the walls. There's arts on both sides. At the dining room table in Jen's apartment, there's this big painting on the wall behind the table. In his penthouse at the end of the hallway, there's sculpture, there's paintings, and it's like of ships and of churches, and of like, it's got this really elaborate framework and stuff. I don't know, to me, it really stood out as a kind of nod to, I'm reading into this what I want to, and I'm just going to leave it. You're asking me for something I liked about the movie, and this is, maybe I'm making this, but this is what I liked doing in the movie, is looking for clues of things that weren't there. But the implication that what's going on behind the scenes here is just, this is an extreme greed display, right? The network clearly isn't interested in some type of sustainable pathway. They see a little spark of something and they go, throw money at it. Like, the only thing that matters to us is money. Get this 19-year-old kid in here who knows nothing. Get this monkey in here. They have no ethic. They're just like a single cell organism that's after money and greed. And honestly, Steve fits well in there, right? He's one of them, essentially. He's doing the exact same thing. So none of the characters in here are people that we really ought to like. We're just kind of watching an example of of a force at work, which is this colonizing force of the boomer and historically white people, white men, going around the world, sort of pilfering and taking resources and expertise and even just hard labor of people around them, and saying, "This is mine now. I'm great, and I award myself authority as a result." And also, I have this narrative about how good I am, and like this effort constantly to backfill and say, well, I'm good because I exploited. I'm not exploiting. I'm good because I found it, right? It's like just as good to have discovered something. I mean, that was a real point that they laid in there. Paired with all this kind of art imagery, I'd like to be able to back it up a little more by actually reverse searching, image searching, like kind of like screenshotting some of this stuff and putting it in there. But I felt like the image choices were so specific and odd. I felt like it was potentially part of that, subtext going on inside of the movie.
So you think like the art director, production designer, they were like trying to pick certain kind of artwork for that would meant?
I would love that. That would be so cool.
I would love to be a fly on the wall in this set, right? Just to get a sense of like what everyone was talking about, what everyone was thinking while making this movie.
Brian, there was a carousel horse in the guy's penthouse. It was a centerpiece of the dude's house. Why? Do you have any idea why they made that choice? Can you fathom?
They were just throwing random stuff in here and there just to.
He said, "I need to entertain. I need to bring executives in here and put them on the pony and go up and down a little bit so that they feel like." I don't know, won over or something, right?
We need to get Robert Butler on the phone. So we need to find him. Anything else you want to say about Robert Butler's direction or any of the performances? Like I said before, Kurt Russell, one of my favorites. He's in so many great films later on in his career, so many beloved films. Mm-hmm. At least some of my favorites. And from this and The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, he was not a great actor when he was younger. He needed a few years and I guess just some better material to improve in his craft, because in the early days he's a bit stiff in this movie, and I think part of it is his character is so unlikable throughout most of the movie. But just his line readings, the way he says stuff in this, I'm just like, this you need some training here, Kurt.
I don't know. I thought it fit in well with the era and the budget level and the story. It's cousins. I thought it made fine company. I don't know whether to judge it beyond those parameters, because I agree it's awful by a lot of other standards, but by its own, I think it was competently done. No hate on the director. He did his thing.
He did what there's nothing really he's doing here that's just awful. It's just there's not a whole lot to work with in the screenplay. And, most of the movies I've been watching for the podcast, whether it's a comedy or drama or a horror film or whatever, they move very slowly at this time, right? Especially not like we're used to, the 2-minute scenes in movies, and it just, we move along no matter what the story is. And in these 71 movies, if you're not really engaged with the story and the performances, they can feel really long.
Do you think that's a honing of the medium itself, like a better understanding of the language, or is that a stylistic thing?
I think it's a mix. I think it's partly honing, and I think partly like we're all just getting more and more ADHD as we get older. And it's just, it's audience expectations. In 1971, audiences expected kind of a lame Disney movie like this. They didn't know there wasn't a whole lot of other films like this at the time. All you need to do is just keep improving, and then once audiences see things that they like that are just better, then you have to keep that quality improving, or the audiences won't show up, right?
Well, it is fascinating.
This movie doesn't work. If this movie comes out in 1991, this movie will not bring in people. Like, this is definitely of its time.
Well, it is fascinating to watch films like this that are made as part of a factory system that is intended to garner a kind of range. Like they weren't like, this is going to be an Oscar thing. This, their expectations were set right down the line. So. And it's fun to watch what choices they make, knowing that's where they're trying to hit, right? And it seems like hit something, right? I mean, it's out there, but it got made, right? Back to the baseline of it got made.
Our bottom line review of this movie is, well, it got made. That's something. So my final question about the movie, Will, is kind of looking at this through a 2021 lens. If they were to take this story and do it now, how would it be different? What would change?
How would it change? Okay, so the TV as a landscape has really changed, right? I mean, we've got not just different platforms, but we've also got different technology, and we've got different ways of consuming stuff too. So I mean, the whole idea of trying to pick winners and losers, the metric is entirely different too. So it'd be interesting to try and think, how would you overlay the premise? And like I said, the core premise of this movie is that dummies are making choices about things that you like, and they're canceling them needlessly, right? No one is looking for quality here. It's all about money, right? And I think that's a story that could translate to modern times. And in a way, Netflix, right? They do guarantee 1-2 seasons or something, and then they usually axe it, right?
Yeah, I think for the most part, there have been a few series, I want to say, that got axed after 1 season, but usually they give it at least 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, what they should do is make a movie that's a close allusion to the Game of Thrones behind the scenes set. And they say, George didn't finish the books to this point, so we got to have someone write these scripts. And due to politics or something, they bring in, I wonder if you'd use a monkey, you'd use an AI. That's what you use, an untrained AI, or, you get some tech kid in who was like, oh yeah, I got deep fakes and stuff, man. Like, we can totally pump out some scripts. And they feed the robot all of George's scripts, and it spits out the last, or books, right? And all the scripts leading up, and it pumps out the last, 2 seasons of Game of Thrones. And that's what they film. And that's why that happens. So
it'd be about a robot like spitting out the final 2 books that will never see the light of day.
It would be about the executives, the overpowered executives at HBO or Netflix or whatever you want to make it, and the tech nerds that rule the world these days, and our unreasonable belief in AI and technology to solve our problems.
I mean, just it would have to be more urgent, more at stake, a more contemporary idea. I thought something to do with like advertising or social media, right? Like all of those, like buttons, and every time you scroll on one of these social media sites, and the certain things that pop up, and it's like, oh, I was just talking about this yesterday with a friend, and now I'm seeing examples of that on my feed. Something to do with like not an actual chimpanzee, but like a robot of some kind. But even that, I mean, that's not really funny. Like if this was like a Disney property, I don't know, like how would I would almost want it to be meta. Like it would be a movie about a group of filmmakers doing a remake of the Barefoot Executive in 2021 and just failing at it from beginning to end. Like, like the making of the movie would, I think, be the way to go.
Well, Brian, you must have, I know you've seen the trailer for the 101 Dalmatians, the
Cruella.
Cruella, yeah, I know you've seen that. That's Disney's thing now, is going dark, taking lighthearted things. I mean, she's a villain. They're clearly going to try and humanize her, just like they did with Angelina Jolie's Maleficent. They're going to do the same thing here. Steve is a terrible villain. Maybe, gosh, I don't know if you swap genders, you do something there. But clearly take a villain here and give it that dark treatment. I don't think just because it's Disney doesn't mean it's got to be light and happy, right?
I'm trying to picture, like, the big world premiere trailer dropping of Steve, of Steve. Like, I don't think anyone would know who that was. Is the problem, right? You have to pick like really well-known Disney properties like 101 Dalmatians. Everybody knows who Cruella de Vil is, so that makes sense.
The premise of the question is already beyond reality, right? No one's remaking this, so we're already stretched too far.
You never know, Will. I mean, all of these, they're looking for content every which way, and they love to update old properties. Right. I just heard that Frasier is being redone, which ended 15 years ago. And what would someone say, the Blue Lagoon? Or I mean, there's some like kind
jeez.
of like middle of the road, not very well known
Right,
properties from
right.
like the 70s and 80s that are getting
Yeah.
updates. You never know, Will.
Well, Brian, have you seen the deep fakes of Tom Cruise on TikTok?
No, what's
No.
that?
Well, I mean, the deep
For
fake
what?
Tom Cruise has a TikTok account, and it's just this dude who I think closely resembles him, and they just do deep fakes on
Okay.
top of him,
Oh,
and
okay.
they're just
Mhm.
short little things. Why? I mean, honestly, I think we're knocking on the door. 10 years from now, we're going to laugh at ourselves here, but we're knocking on the door here of deep fakes in film, and why not just go back to this time? Go back and do
Okay.
do a continuation. Kurt Russell, they ride off into the sunset, and just like Wizard of Oz kind of thing. Instead of
Yeah.
a prequel, we just visit same characters, and instead of recasting, we just keep on with Kurt Russell.
You don't think Kurt Russell, who is still acting today, the Christmas Chronicles 2 just dropped on Netflix in what, November, December of last year.
Yeah.
You don't think he'd be up for a 50 years later sequel?
Well, he'd be like
we revisit Stephen Post?
he could be like the Irishman, and they just CGI his face. He's still got that old man amble. See, we go right full circle here, Brian. Like he's still got that old man walk. It fits. He can go right back into the role.
They CGI'd his face in which Marvel movie was that? Guardians of the Galaxy's Volume 2. Didn't
And
they
did
CGI
well
him
on
at
that.
the beginning?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
he looked pretty young.
Yeah,
I think it's easier, right? Well, when there's actual like footage on film of an actor from when they were younger, does that help?
I wonder if they cast specifically that kind. Did you see Gemini Man with
Yeah,
with Will Smith
and then
stuff?
they de-aged him in that movie.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. They can do it. They've got an army 300 deep of rotoscopers and CGI artists overseas who will do it and then not get paid.
So wait, so what are we suggesting that Kurt Russell does now? He does the same movie again, just
No, he just does part 2. I'm dying to know, where do they drive off in the sunset? I mean, this guy's thirst for power has got to lead him somewhere interesting. I'm sure there's going to be a new scheme he cooks up, and he's still got the monkey. I mean, maybe he just goes to radio, or I mean, what's the next thing that happens in the 70s here? Maybe there's like a technology shift that happens a few years later. He just takes it to movies, right? We can, like you said, meta. He just takes it to movies.
So as if the sequel had come out in 72 or 73, they would just make it now with Russell looking younger.
Yeah.
What would the sequel be called, Will?
Oof. So it was the Barefoot Executive.
Yep. So would it just be the Barefoot Executive 2, or would we give it something more interesting?
It would be the Barefoot Executive 2, but I would more deeply appreciate something that was just really unconnected, like like the shirtless, man, or just, just like do another article of clothing. It's a simple formula.
Instead of 2 bare feet, the sequel would be 4 bare feet.
The barefoot movie star or something. Yeah, you could just the barefoot something. It can be just like Fast and Furious. You can keep on going. The barefoot something or other. 2 barefoot, 2 no shoes.
Like how they did in the 90s and 2000s. They churned out like 15 Land Before Time sequels, like those animated movies. And wouldn't they call it like The Land Before Time Part 11? Like they would just. So if all goes well in the next 10 years, we're going to get a lot of sequels to the Barefoot Executive, but set in the 70s, right?
Yeah. I won't watch them unless
you won't watch them.
I would not watch that.
We'll do a bonus episode for the podcast where you'll have to come back and talk about them.
Okay.
So going way back, Will, you talked about my 4-star rating. I still do use that for this podcast. So I would give this movie, it's not the worst film I've looked at since September. I would give this movie 1 star.
Whoa, man! I think,
out of 4.
I really feel like there was a time that you would have given this 2.5 stars.
Back when I was easier.
Is there some development I'm seeing here? Yeah.
No, I've talked about a little bit, like in the late 90s. I saved all of my star ratings for movies going all the way back to 97. Yeah. And I mean, there are some really bad films that I gave 3.5 stars, some 4, and I'm like, wow. I mean, it was hard when I was in high school, even a little bit into college. Like, I would, and I still do this to this day. When I sit down with a movie, I want to like it, right? I don't put on something and say, "Oh God, this is gonna be rough." But
I mean,
yeah,
but wait,
now
but
I'm much more critical.
do you want to like it in the sense of like
Have a good time.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Under what criteria? Is it like you want to have a good time regardless of whether you're booing it or yaying it? Or do you want to be like, this was a quality film. I want this to be a quality film.
Like I put on the Barefoot Executive, not expecting a great movie. I was hoping for something funny and silly and entertaining in a dated way, like The Love Bug kind of. And I was like, oh, okay, you know, I don't put on a movie like this, you know, thinking I'm going to be very, very bored for 90 minutes, right? So yeah, I would say I'm more critical now than I was back in the day. Honestly, Will, I have had trouble coming up with a top 10 list of 2020. I have seen one movie after another, films released last year and into just February here, where for the Oscars, they're allowing movies to come out in January, February. There I'm not going to name them, but there have been 10 movies I've watched in the last 4 months that's getting, you know, great ratings and reviews, and I'm like 2 stars. You know? So I feel like I am more critical now. I don't know. In 2007, would I have given the Barefoot Executive 2.5 stars? Maybe if all 4 of us or 5 of us, however many of us were there, had watched it together and we're just laughing our asses off, having a great time at how bad it was, maybe I would have given it more. Watching it by myself.
Okay, I think that
after a long day of teaching, and I am like, okay, I'm gonna put on this 71 Disney movie. Hopefully it's fun. And I'm like an hour in doing like that ledge scene. I'm like, oh boy. And what's hard, Will, is that, you know, a few titles I've looked at since September for the podcast I had seen before, but for the most part, I'm inviting guests and I don't know the quality of the movie. I know nothing. So I was watching this movie, Will, and I'm like, oh man, Will's not going to be happy with me.
Well, talk more about how you chose this film, because at some points in the movie, I thought you were aiming this at me. Like you said to yourself, no. what's going to get Will the most riled up? And this movie, for some reason, hit that bell for you.
So first off, I'm trying to pick movies for the podcast that are somewhat known. I'm trying to not record episodes about movies that are so rare and little known. I mean,
you're just using your own expertise to make that judgment, or are you using some kind of ranking system online to like?
Well, I go online and I pick I look at the calendar list of the movies that were released theatrically month to month of like early 71. And I look up all the titles. I think about what I might like to watch. What are some films that listeners might care to listen to an episode about? And there has to be something about the movie that interests me. And I am a big Disney fan. So I'll pretty much watch anything that's a Disney property, even if it's bad like this one. And I was thinking back on, I had our former roommate Scott Gardner on for the Aristocats, which was the last Disney movie I did. And then I had Katie Bodie, our other former roommate, come on to talk about like a stop motion Christmas movie, Santa Claus is Coming to Town. So it was kind of this thing. Well, I'm like, I had them both on for these family friendly movies. If I'm going to bring Will on, it felt right to have you come on and do a family friendly movie too. And then when I saw that Kurt Russell was the lead, if Kurt Russell had not been the lead of this movie, if it had been a no-name actor I didn't know, I don't think I would have done it. Kurt Russell pushed me into doing an episode on this movie.
Is this the youngest you've seen Kurt Russell?
I'd only seen The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes from 1969. That was maybe a year and a half before this. That was the first thing I had seen him this young in. Prior to that, the youngest I had seen him in a movie, probably Escape from New York in the early 80s. So I've only known him really on film as an adult, in his 30s and older. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that definition is shifting as we age too. I know every time I see one of these actors who I recall, especially in war films too, right? I'm sure you're having this experience now that we're in our 30s kind of thing. You're watching war films and everyone's in their mid 20s, and that's a little startling. This movie was startling, for other reasons, namely that there's, he was 21. He was playing a 21-year-old kid in this movie.
Okay. Right? So when he shot the film, he was born in 51. So they would have shot this in 1970. So he was like 18, 19 when they shot it.
Yeah. Well, they wanted to have depict him drinking a little wine, I think. So they put him up to 21, and then they were like, they had that whole segment in there where he was like, well, Alexander Hamilton and like Alexander the Great, and he's like, is that king who was 9 months old when he assumed the throne? Like they made a big point about someone being so young being able to be in charge of everything, and the case wasn't convincing, and it makes me wonder if that was like how audiences at the time would take something like that. You know what I mean? Because I mean, on its face, it's rather dumb, the idea that they keep promoting this kid, but the emphasis they put on it really was so strange to me. I'm not, I don't know what to make of it.
Do you think, will any two people in the history of the world have analyzed this movie as much as we have for the last hour?
God, I hope not. That would be terrible.
Well, here it is, ladies. If you've been waiting 50 years for that great analysis of the Barefoot Executive, here it is.
See if you can dig it up, because it ain't online. And
it's not. Places. Yeah, I think what was it on Amazon Prime? I think had it for a few bucks. Yeah, but yeah, it's not easy to. It's not on Disney Plus. I would again love to know, like, how do they pick? Because a few of the Kurt Russell movies he did for Disney are not on Disney Plus. Like there's like 2 more right after this that are also on there, but they do have The Strongest Man in the World and The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes. So I don't know what that's about.
It's like a museum and famous artists, Brian. They have a vault and they don't put all the collections out. They cycle them through, and maybe in a few years here they'll say, this era now is ripe, so we'll pull it out of the vault.
You think they would drop the Barefoot Executive, Will, on Disney Plus to celebrate its 50th anniversary?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, perfect opportunity. Yeah. They'll hear this podcast and then they'll think of it.
If it's not there come mid-March, everybody check it out elsewhere if you'd like to. It's not getting my endorsement. But if you're a fan of Kurt Russell and 70s Disney movies, you might want to take a look and just prepare yourself for not a great time.
Yeah, and if you want a little context around why boomers are the way they are, just take a look and you'll see them in their heyday living it up. I mean, can't get this... I'm not going to get political on your mind here, but yeah, I'll stop it there.
All right, Will. So that takes us to our final 2 segments. The first segment is called the Divine Double Feature. That's where we pick a more modern film that we think would make a good double feature with this movie. And what did you go with for the Barefoot Executive? So it's only 90 minutes. It's been a rough go. What's something better they can put on after this one ends?
Better after this. Oof. All right. I honestly, I think that this is campy and light. You want something that's fun. It's weird for me to think let's put a movie on for a palate cleanser, right? But I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about.
We kind of need to.
Yeah. You see this movie and then you want to feel like something good happened in your life. I know that this is a different medium, but I just feel like these days the mediums blend together. But I'm really into WandaVision, and I love watching that. I love the detail level on there. I love that it's got that film history. I think I went a couple of years ago, just kind of went through that journey myself, watching Dick Van Dyke Show and like going up through the 70s and stuff and watching all those era changes. And I think that's really cool. And you kind of dip into this era too, and it's fun to contextualize it in cinema history. So I wonder if you would just throw in some couple episodes of WandaVision, because they're only half hour.
That show is so fascinating. I can't tell you many people I've talked to that turned it off after episode 2, and they were like, not going. And I'm like, no, keep going. Because it's like, what is this? This is like some black and white sitcom for 9 episodes. I'm not watching that. It's like, people, no, give it a few more. I knew, knowing like it was a Marvel property, I was like, it's going to be more than this, and it is, and it's so much more. It's so great. The final episode will have aired after we recorded this, but I just watched episode 8, and it's so rich, so many great surprises, and so many fantastic performances in the show. And
it reminds me I think
you should just watch the entirety of it.
It reminds me of Westworld, where it's like you heard about WandaVision for years now. Heard about Westworld when it was first previewed. Yeah. It took a couple of years, and you're just like, come on, what's going on? And then
a lot of properties now are just, they're waiting in the wings for so long. Like
this one, you really feel like they put attention to it, the details. It's fun to be able to keep unearthing.
Yeah, and such a great mix of like comedy and drama and thrills, and you never know where it's going next. And that's a fantastic choice. And you said you watched a lot of the Dick Van Dyke Show. I still have never seen that. And someone just pointed out on Twitter the other day that it's on Hulu. Is that worth a look, the Dick Van Dyke Show?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And for some of the same reasons that I enjoyed this one, though, that one is much more harmless, right? Because it's a little more levity in that one. But I enjoy the technical aspect of it. I enjoy watching that, and I enjoy watching what was considered humorous at the time. What was just like a normal thing that you might see in a situation. You go, oh, that's funny. I mean, I think in the premiere episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show, one of the things he does is entertains a group of executives, right? Or some people from his work. And he does so by doing this big famous bit where he pretends to be a drunk, right? And his wife sort of, when she puts eyes on him, the woman playing his wife, he's straight up, I'm not drunk at all. And the moment she turns away, he's got that great physical comedy, right? So he kind of melts into chairs and falls over and stuff. That's funny. Dick Van Dyke does that thing funny. And I'm sure they wrote that scene around being able to take advantage of his skills there. But what's funny is that an audience would watch it and say, oh, as you do, sit around and play charades or you know what I mean? Do a bunch of physical comedy for your boss. It's strange, but at the time it really worked. And I think trying to reverse engineer in a way some of the norms and things that were going on at the time through watching these old shows is part of the enjoyment of watching them.
Yeah, I have to check it out. I just recorded an episode a few weeks ago on a Dick Van Dyke movie called Cold Turkey. Kind of an interesting career in that he made tons and tons of movies between 63 and 71, and then almost nothing. After that, it's all television outside of the occasional like Night at the Museum or Mary Poppins Returns. He had this little window of 8 years where he appeared in like 8 to 10 films, and that's mostly it.
Yeah, it seems like Mary Poppins was the big light, and they kept trying to replicate it. And Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, I remember being a fan of that as a kid, but still, I guess at the box office at the time, it didn't perform as well, and it was part of the decline there. And I guess he suffered from alcoholism and a number of things like that. So I mean, personally and professionally, it's odd someone like that who's so beloved. My wife and I were having a conversation about people like that who as A-listers, but when you look at their career, you listen to Hollywood executives talk, they go like, this person is not, you can't bankroll this person. And a great example of that is Ryan Reynolds, right? Someone who you just undeniably is a movie star, but he doesn't have the movie history to back that.
Yeah, it took Daredevil. Daredevil. Deadpool. It took Deadpool for him to finally be in a big success where he's like the sole lead. Yeah. But they were pushing Reynolds for many, many years in a lot of properties that never really took hold.
They still are. You still see him showing up in things, and they're not good. For some reason, you always feel like, oh, that's a shame. The movie fell apart. He did so good. He's so great. I love seeing that guy.
Dick Van Dyke, great actor. We looked at the very last movie he made in those 8 years, and then after Cold Turkey, he was back to TV. But I'm going to check out his Dick Van Dyke Show for sure. So my choice, Will, had to do with apes. I went with my favorite of the new trilogy, and that's Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which I really liked War too, but I felt like the best in terms of like the story and the pacing and the acting and the surprises was the second one. Have you seen any of those newer Planet of the Apes movies?
I have. Yeah, I'm eager to hear those. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on that whole universe, that whole thing, the old ones, the remake too, like, because you had, like I said at the top, you had that bust,
the box set of the original film. I
mean, it's not just a box set, it's a bust of Caesar, right?
I still have it.
DVD slide in the back. Like, what a collector's item. Did you get that simply because it was half off somewhere because the stuff sucks, or was it like, this is part of my? I mean, you have an alien one with an egg, right? Do you have that one too? Or
I never got the egg. I have the Alien quadrilogy, and I have a stack of Blu-rays and DVDs. I believe in physical media. I still have all that. My favorite of all of those movies is the original with Charlton Heston from 1968. I don't think any of them have ever come close to just how great. But I mean, the new trilogy is very different in terms of like how it's presented and the technology and much more action oriented. I liked Rise, which was the first one of the new trilogy, but it really was the Dawn and War that I got into it and really came to admire what the director Matt Reeves was doing, and so well directed and acted all the way through, and great action and storytelling. And I feel like a palate cleanser would be, let's move away from light Disney fluff and put on Dawn of the Planet of the Apes to get a thrill ride after Barefoot Executive. I think that would be a good thing to do.
Well, that kind of harkens back to earlier when we were talking about the remake problem, right? We're having, these beloved films in the 70s, and now you have a remake thing. And to me, these new ape films are objectively better on just about every level, right?
Oh, yeah.
The technology is there. It's just beautiful looking. And at the same time, I have no love for the new ones, and I love the original ones. Even in what really blew my mind, what I love so much is being able to watch them back to back to back and watch the writers just descend into a kind of, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like aiming lower and lower. I'm just grabbing the nearest trope and cramming it in here. And that circular way that it becomes a time loop in the original ones, right? Where it's like they cause the events in the first one by the end of the movie because it's time travel and stuff. And
Yeah.
It's one of the three ways you treat time travel. But the modern movies instead take on the plague aspect, right? Which seems like that's everything we're doing in the past 15 years or something. You're just like, imagine this, half the population.
Yeah, that's how Rise from 2011, it ends, right? With that one carrier, and then it starts spreading. Yeah. That's how it ends.
Yeah, it really speaks to our fears. I mean, obviously, nuclear bomb back then, you have the whole bomb thing is major centerpiece, and then later we've got this plague stuff. We're living in the middle of it, so it's obviously a real kind of thing. But it's fascinating the way that those starting points, and cause of the fear, shapes the product. And honestly, I don't think that the plague stuff makes for a better story. I mean, it's like darker and grimmer. It's one of those things that feels more real as modern and more modern time. Time. But it leads you to a place that is just has less intellectual meat. You know what I mean? Less to chew on. Where it's like the other one.
Yeah.
It opens this thing of like the nuclear bomb is a kind of destruction, but it's got a creation element to it. Do you know what I mean? Because not only do you have all the people wiped out and they're mute and all that kind of stuff, but you also have the creation of this whole civilization, the monkey civilization, and then underground, all the psychics and the people there. It's like there's this magic element and stuff to it. So really kind of 70s sci-fi, that's my sweet spot when it comes to sci-fi, which is my favorite genre anyway. But it's just one of those places that they are really enjoying the creation element of it. Like Star Trek, the movie, I don't know which one it was, but where they have Vija, where they go out and they see the satellite that's sort of gone out, and it's like a person, it's like developed a consciousness and stuff. They weren't afraid at that time to sort of use sci-fi to talk about things that could be at the edge of our imagination in a positive creation sense. And nowadays, it's just like, well, what if everything died and rotted? That would be hard. Let's watch that for a while, hope and love will persevere, but there'll be a lot of dead people.
Science fiction is flourishing in 1970s cinema. Like we're this month we'll have dropped an episode about THX 1138, the feature directorial debut of George Lucas, and so many classic films of the genre coming up here. We'll definitely want to have you back to talk about a really cool science fiction movie. I promise, Will. I will find a better film for you next time around. Something more up your alley for sure. But let's go to our final segment. Because this film stars the great Kurt Russell, I wanted to end kind of talking about his career. Before we get into his movies, any that we really like, you got to meet Kurt Russell. Can we talk about that experience at all?
Sure. I wasn't going to name drop, Brian, but since you brought it up, I was
there that night.
Yeah, that's right. We got to meet Kurt on a first name basis with Kurt.
Yep.
No, my memory, my interaction with Kurt, he came to our college and gave a talk about Tombstone. They aired Tombstone, and he talked about it afterwards.
Oh,
right.
This is before that night of awards. There was another. Did I go to that? I feel it sounds familiar. Maybe I did go to that. It's been, what was that, 06, 05, something like that? Maybe before?
I think it was this 06 or 07. It was the year we graduated. I think it was shortly beforehand. But honestly, I may be wrong. I know that he talked about Tombstone, and that might have just been in the Q&A section before. But what was interesting is he talked, one of the memories that stands out to me, what he was talking about at the time was Tombstone, and the abysmal behind the stories, the scene story, where it was just really hard to get made. And I think he kind of donned a authoritative charge in the creation of that movie. And he was talking about the rain trucks at one point, and the way that it looks so bad. At one point, it's like raining in the foreground, not in the background. And he was pissed because at the time they weren't supplying him with enough trucks and stuff. And talking about the backstory there and on how something gets made. And it's amazing to watch a movie like Tombstone or any of his movies or any movie in general, really, this one included. And you see the thing on in front that got made and you just sort of buy it the way it is. But every filmmaker is always shooting for something beyond what actually gets printed. And it was fun to see him talk about that experience in real life. But that's the first place in person seeing Kurt Russell. Later, I was the recipient of a award from our college for best writing.
Best screenplay for LMU for, what was that? I want to say it was the end of September or early October of 2007.
Yep. Made a film in our class that semester, got best screenplay, and they had an award ceremony at the DGA, right? Wasn't it?
Yep, it was at the DGA building.
Yeah, so we went down there and our little friend group and several of us were given awards, and Kurt Russell was there to present them with Goldie Hawn. And I think we screened them beforehand. They were just shorts. Then he was up on stage and kind of talked a little bit, went backstage, got to shake his hand, take a picture, that kind of thing. And nice. He's nice guys for us, I could tell. I don't know what to say about him personally, but my experience with him was that was a cordial interaction. That was nice. It was cool. Physically, it's always the case whenever you meet an actor or something in person. It's always fun to sort of compare it to the image you have in the big person on the screen to the physical.
That was kind of a thrilling night. I didn't actually get to meet either one, but I got to see them and they went up and talked and stuff. And in the 90s, I was a big fan of both Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn, and to see them together that night, that was kind of fun. So what are your favorite Kurt Russell movies, Will? Do you have a couple favorites of his that you like?
Well, I said, I think we talked earlier, is the idea of the older Kurt Russell being a favorite version of mine, right?
Okay.
I like the old man version. And I especially like the soft old man version too. I think that's one of the things that I like about Elf. I know that's my wife's favorite film, but the dad character, whose name should be coming to me, but it's escaping me.
The James Caan character?
No, the buddies, in the North Pole, the elf dad.
Ed Asner?
No, the sitcom star, the Bob.
Bob Newhart. Bob Newhart.
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah.
Third time's a charm.
I just love that kind of very soft old man depiction, and I like seeing Kurt Russell that way because I think the hard muscle man kind of thing is something he does well, but I think he also just really does the gentle thing too. I know that you're talking about him being stiff in this movie and stuff, but I think that charm that he has is still fairly present here, even in the beginning. And it's nice it's terrible to watch someone with that natural spark sort of abusing monkeys, and it's nice to see him instead gifting people, even if it's a little ridiculous.
So you like the Christmas Chronicles movies?
I like the Christmas Chronicles movies, but to go back on what I just said, I also like Tombstone. I've watched a bunch of those clips recently and really enjoy. I think it's the friendship dynamic in there that I really enjoy with Doc Holliday, and I think there's a bunch of really cartoonish sort of standoff types of things, but their friendship is something that comes across on screen really genuinely, and I think that's something that's attractive.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of these episodes, Will, when I have to come up with 2 or 3 favorites of an actor, it's hard. Like, I'm like, geez, I only like one. This was insane. I mean, I put together maybe 15 films of his that I really love. I was like, oh, well, which ones do I pick for my favorites? I mean, just a few of the movies of his I really like are The Thing, Tequila Sunrise, Tango and Cash, Backdraft is great. Captain Ron was a favorite when I was young. That came out in 92 with Martin Short, was really funny. He doesn't do comedy, especially around the 80s and 90s. It's all action movie star, right? So very few comedies of his around that time, but Captain Ron's really good. Tombstone, as you said. I loved Executive Decision. I loved in those mid 90s, we got a lot of like airplane, like terrorist plots, like Air Force One and Executive Decision and Turbulence and all these cheesy movies. I like that one. He's really good in a supporting role. And one of my favorite films of 2001, and that was Vanilla Sky with Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz. He has a small role in that. He's really great in the movie Miracle, another Disney movie, which I believe was his first Disney movie after leaving it when he was in his early 20s. Like he did mostly kind of action films and R-rated films for many, many decades. And then in 2004, we get him in Miracle. And then in 2005, he does Sky High, both for Disney. So he kind of came back into the loop there, which was kind of cool. Yeah. And then he started to work with Quentin Tarantino. Death Proof, The Hateful Eight, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Do you like his work with Tarantino at all? Have you seen any of those?
I think Death Proof came out when we were still living together, right? Was that something
came out in the spring of 2007?
Yeah.
I didn't see it with you. I remember I saw it back in Reno. I think it came out over spring break or something.
Yeah. I remember seeing that movie at the time, and the thing that really stuck out to me was the look and the feel of it visually. Again, you know what I mean, from a visual effects standpoint, like that grind texture and the promos for it and stuff. I was like, oh wow, they're really mocking that thing up authentically, and it's looking really nice. Pretty much same era as the first Iron Man film, and the end credits there. That was something that really blew my mind, watching the 3D robot sort of, or the armor sort of coming apart and stuff. And that was a time when I feel like CGI was starting to become more convincing, and that movie where Rose McGowan has the gun leg and stuff, I don't know, I'm sure you look back at it now, it's fairly cheesy, but it still stands up to a degree much more than something like in the 90s or even the early 2000s does. And still, that's speaking again from my expertise, what I'm interested in visually, story wise. Those movies are creepy, man. They get creepy. They get weird. I saw a clip recently with I didn't realize that gosh, what's her name? She was in Fargo and
Frances McDormand.
No, Weinstead. Mary Louise. No, is that her name? You know what I'm talking about?
Fargo. Mary Louise Parker?
No. Oh gosh.
Mary Elizabeth Winstead?
Yes, that's who I'm talking about. Yeah.
Third time's a charm.
Yes. She's in that movie, right? She's like very young in that movie. She plays like a cheerleader or something. And
it's a big ensemble cast of like women in their early 20s.
Yeah. I mean, this is like critical of Tarantino more than anything said about Kurt, but the movie itself is just, it's exploitation. I guess they're leaning into that kind of thing, but it felt creepy.
I think Tarantino styled that one, especially after like a 70s exploitation action movie. Yeah. But you know, at that time in 2007, he was becoming a little bit more of a softie in films like Miracle and Sky High, and in Death Proof, we get a very hard-edged, performance from Kurt Russell that we hadn't seen in a while.
He still was fairly convincing as the tough guy kind of thing.
Not so much now. He's better as Santa now.
Like I said, Fast and Furious is where he turned that corner for me, and I think this was before that. So he still could do the cutoff T-shirt and get away with it, but not anymore.
So here are my three favorites. Tombstone's very high up. I would put that as 4, if not 5, if not 4. My third favorite is, I'm a huge John Carpenter fan. I think their best film together is Escape from New York from 1981. Which is dated. It's it's not like it doesn't have the best visual effects of any Carpenter movie by any means, but there's something about the character he plays in that. I just love the look of that film. It's shot by Dean Cundy, who also shot Halloween and The Fog, and there's just something about that era and the way John Carpenter likes to use very, very wide screen and not a whole lot of special effects. A lot of it's most of it's in camera, and his incredible ensemble cast in that movie. It's just one of my favorites of his. I think that's really great. And it shows a new side to Kurt Russell that nobody had seen up until that point. So I think that was important.
The eye patch.
The eye patch. And the muscles and action star. That was his first movie as like an action hero, right? And I think he did that really well. My second favorite is Silkwood from 1983, the one and only movie he got a major nomination for, and that was the Golden Globe Award. That's a film. It stars Meryl Streep. She's the lead. It's a film written by, or at least co-written by Nora Ephron, directed by Mike Nichols, also starring Cher. Will.
Well, there you go. That's why it makes sense.
Who got an Oscar nomination for that movie along with Meryl Streep. It's a really great dramatic film based on a true story. It's one of Meryl Streep's probably best performances in her long career, and definitely worth a look. And my favorite film, Will, I don't know if you've seen it. I've seen it so many times. I saw it with my dad. I would have been 12. And I was all about this movie for years, and I still think it's really great. And that is 1997's Breakdown. Have you seen that?
That's a great 1997 title. No, I haven't seen it. Tell me about it.
So Breakdown, it's a thriller, again, without really any special effects. It's the story of Kurt Russell plays this kind of average Joe. He's crossing the country, I believe going to California for work for his job. And when he's with his wife, played by Kathleen Quinlan, and their car breaks down, and this guy gets out of his truck to help them out, and his wife goes with the truck driver to the next town.
Right.
And he wants to stay with the car because he has been kind of harassed by this other driver, and he's worried if he leaves the car by itself, like they're going to take it or whatever. And so he stays put, waiting for his wife to come back with help, and she never does. And it's almost like a real-time 90-minute action movie where he all of a sudden realizes my wife has been kidnapped. I'm in the middle of nowhere in the desert. What do I do? And it's just a great Kurt Russell performance, fantastic action. Really another really good ensemble cast. And the last 20 minutes, the suspense is unbearable. Like the last 20 minutes, I still to this day think it's shot so well. It's directed by Jonathan Mostow, who would go on to do some movies I don't like so much, like Terminator 3 and a couple others that I've seen. His best film by far is Breakdown. And it's just a really great, fun 90 minutes. It's a wild ride of a movie with a really fantastic lead performance by Kurt Russell. I think he's fantastic in it. So
I'm remembering this film now. Yeah.
Did I ever show that one to you?
I don't know. I know I've seen pieces of it, and I think my wife really enjoys it, and I think I might have seen it through her. But no, I am familiar, I think, with, if I haven't seen all of it, I've seen a bunch of the
part of it,
and that's a great Brian Rowe answer. I think that and I agree with you totally. I love the simplicity of the premise.
Very simple premise.
You take away, you put them on the open road, you take away so many possibilities. And it's a movie, obviously, it only worked in the 90s with payphone technology being the lead way to communicate.
I believe he has a cell phone so it would have been shot in like 96. He has a big phone, but they're in the middle of the desert. So there's no service. He can't call out.
It's something that they really would do in the 90s. Take something like that, and like the Mack truck too. That's such a perfect sort of 90s idea of like muscle and intimidation.
But he's not playing the hero of Escape from New York. He's playing an average Joe. He doesn't look muscular or anything. He just kind of looks like, a regular guy.
It's kind of what Schwarzenegger, the kinds of movies Schwarzenegger was making at the time, except Schwarzenegger is, if we didn't live in America at this time and whatever, you just see this artifact from some strange culture and be like, what is this?
It's kind of hard to buy Stallone and Schwarzenegger as an average Joe in a movie.
Yeah. We did it, but I agree. Kurt does it better.
Kurt does it better in Breakdown. And J.T. Walsh plays the villain right before his death. He died, I believe, in 97 or 98, one of his final film performances. Does a great job. He's a very chilling villain, and just a fun ride. Check it out if you've never seen Breakdown from 97.
I'm sure you can find that on a streaming service a little easier than the Barefoot Executive.
A little bit easier than the Barefoot Executive. All right, that takes us to the end here, Will. This has been so much fun to catch up with you and talk about this crazy Disney movie. This is one of my favorite episodes of the podcast so far. This was a lot of fun. To end here, Will, do you have anything you want to promote or anywhere our listeners can find you online? Now would be the time.
Nope. I'm an exceedingly private person, and I don't make that many public things, so nothing to promo at the time, Brian, though I appreciate the platform.
All right, well, thank you for being here, Will. This was a thrill, and thanks to all of you for listening. You can find Film at 50 online at filmat50.com. We're on all the socials, and check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/filmat50. There's at least 2 exclusive bonus episodes every month, so check that out and support the podcast. Until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.